That's on. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the CED lecture series. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Beth Lilly, who's an artist, whose photographs, installations, and videos investigate how we become what we are and the role choice, chance, and circumstance play in the ongoing evolution. Lilly holds an MFA in photography from Georgia State University and an ABJ in telecommunication art right from here, from the University of Georgia. Her work resides in the permanent collections of a number of institutions: the High Museum, the New Mexico Museum of Art, the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Mocha, Georgia, the Zuckerman Museum, as well as in many private collections. Recently, she's exhibited at the New Mexico Art Museum, at the High Museum of Art, Spalding Nick's Fine Art Gallery in Atlanta, the White Space Gallery, the Atlanta Contemporary Art Center, and the Center for Fine Art Photography, among others. The recipient of numerous awards and grants, her work has also been reproduced and reviewed in publications such as Paper Mag, The Bitter Southerner, Atlanta Magazine, and Arts ATL. In addition to her artwork, she teaches, curates, and serves on the board of the Atlanta Photography Group. Today, she will talk about her work titled The Seventh Bardo, which is currently on display in the Circle Gallery right down the hall. The project, 10 years in the making, is a collection of landscapes and portraits in which Lilly explores the otherworldly experience. That makes it sound so much nicer than the highway can actually be. Of driving on the U.S. interstates. She currently lives and farms in Clarkston, Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Beth Lilly.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. And Katie has been wonderful to work with, and I think she's done just a fabulous job of putting everything together in the gallery. It looks really amazing, everything that I hoped for. And then I would also like to extend thanks to everybody here that's connected to the college. I think it's really cool that you maintain a gallery and invite artists to participate. It's a wonderful opportunity. And as I'm sitting here looking at you, feeling a little nervous, I have to remind myself that at one time when I was an undergraduate, I did model nude for an art class in this very building. And, you know, yeah, if I can drop my clothes in here, surely I can talk with not so much nervousness. I think I'll start with the most pressing question, which is how, why would an artist find inspiration for a body of work with the interstate? Because let's face it, it is not the sexiest structure in contemporary society. In explaining this question, I will start with my personal history, kind of going way back to when I was in high school, and I lived in a very small town, and it was so exciting and just actually life-changing when I got my driver's license and I was able to go out and do things. The excitement soon wore off as I got really, really eager to leave and go out and start my adult life, but I had to kind of cool my jets for a while. And when I get really, really frustrated, what I would do is get in my car, I'd drive towards Atlanta, and I'd get on 285 and circle the city. And it did two things. One, I could kind of pretend that I was like running away from home without actually doing it. And the other thing is that it was just a beautiful experience, you know, to have the windows down, my music on. It was summer, and then, you know, the windows down and the breeze. And very soon, you know, I would cool off, feel better, and I'd go back to do another day of the daily slog. So then further on in my adult life, it became a habit of mine when I was in a particularly difficult emotional situation, some kind of life change. That was just my go-to. I would get in my car and I'd come up with an excuse to go on the interstate and drive. And that's where I could find peace and solitude and just kind of work through, process all my issues. And so when I started this project, it was in 2014. At that time, I was recently divorced. I had left my corporate job to be a full-time artist. Ergo, I was broke. And so my solution always was, well, I'm going to visit a lot of friends who live in very far distant cities. But I knew that the real reason was to get in the car and to drive and figure this all out. And that's what I was doing. And I worked through most of it. And you also can't sit in a car and think about your personal life for 6 or 8 hours straight. So I would get bored, and what does a photographer do when they're bored? They pick up their camera and they just starting to shoot out the windows at whatever I pass. So here are some early photographs from that time. And I don't know about you, but I saw this picture and it was just eye candy, you know? It just kind of does something to me, the black and the white and the blur, and I just had that feeling of speed and power, and I just thought it was pretty awesome. And I was also very interested in the pictures that I came up with, the people that I was passing or that were passing me, particularly people who looked like they were lost in thought. And I wondered, were they caught up in the same thing that I was doing? Were they also in their cars thinking about their past, worrying about their future? Maybe they're escaping something. And I was very curious about it. So I photographed for a while on this project, and I just kind of hit this plateau or maybe a wall because I wasn't really sure what it was about at the heart of it. And that meant that I couldn't really go forward with it till I had figured that out. So what I did, there was this shot that I think of as kind of a guidepost. There was something about this photograph that really had me hooked. And I knew there was something important there. And the answer to the meaning behind the project was in there. So I made an 8x10 print, and I put it up next to my computer. And so I would be looking at it often and kind of letting this project stew on the back burner while I worked on other things. So come 2020, when we had the pandemic, and I was thinking, okay, what kind of project that I could work on? And then I thought about this one. I was like, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to be able to go out of the house, and I'm going to be able to photograph people without, jeopardizing anybody's health. And there was issues going around then about connection and disconnection. I thought this was related somehow. So I started the project up again. And I would go on these long road trips, 3, 4, 5 days, and photographing all day long. This time, though, when I was on the road, I wasn't mulling over ideas of my personal life. What I was working on was the problem, the issue of what is this really about? Why do I find interstates so fascinating? And I eventually came to my conclusion, clearly. And that is, here it is in a nutshell. These are not photographs of the interstate. These are photographs about the experience of driving on the interstate. And once I realized that, I was off to the races. So let's go back a little bit. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about today with you guys, and I want you to know that you're absolutely the audience that I dreamed of connecting with, because one of the things I find fascinating is the unintended consequences of public spaces. They're designed for some sort of specific this, that, or the other, and there's something about the way they're designed that spins out and evolves into ways that affect society that no one ever dreamed of. And so I want to go over some design features of the interstate, and then I'll talk about how they're related and how they created this kind of unique experience. So, first of all, there are different rules for driving on the interstate than driving anywhere else. On the interstate, you cannot stop, you cannot turn, God forbid, you cannot go in reverse. And if you want to leave the interstate, then you have to go this convoluted process. I mean, if you want to change directions, you have to get off the interstate, go around, come back on. It's very complicated. 2, by design, nothing ever happens on the interstate. They have made it as unchallenging as possible, because when people are driving 80, 90 miles an hour, the last thing you want is a surprise. You do not want these people challenged. Number 3, interstates have no specific geographic location. And what I mean is, like, somebody calls you on the phone and they say, "Where are you at?" And you say, "I'm on the interstate." You don't say, "I'm at mile marker 141, crossing over from Georgia into Alabama." It doesn't matter. You could be in Texas or Maine or Missouri. Your answer is going to be, "I am on the interstate." Because it's just this one humongous thing that covers all of the United States. Which brings me to point number 4. To be on the interstate is to be everywhere simultaneously, because the interstate has no beginning and no end. It's just this one loop. So when you get on it, you're on like the entirety of it. The next one, number 5, you are also nowhere, because by design, the interstate does not go anywhere, right? It has no destination. It goes by things, it goes close to things, but it does not go to anywhere. And then the final thing, driving, it takes roughly 1 minute to go 1 mile. So, time and space conflate. They become the same thing. And then, because there is no kind of landmarks, instead it's the same repeating structures: billboard, exit ramp, overpass, billboard. They all look the same. So you have really no way to gauge how long you've been on the road or how far you've gone. So these design items alone make it a really very different, interesting kind of place. And I think of it kind of as this parallel universe, that at any point in time, you can leave the everyday world as we know it and just slip into this other world. And it's this very strange world, because it's like everybody is in their own bubble floating down the interstate, and the structure of the car itself cuts you off from the surroundings. It's like you're nowhere. And then even though cars are passing by just a couple feet from you, it's like they're not even there. And if you choose to disconnect, that means you are totally outside of the world. And that can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing, because it's a way to legitimately get out of all duties, responsibilities, communication with all the world, to be free of all of those demands and distractions. You know, your boss calls, says, "Hey, I need you to be in a meeting, 4 o'clock on Thursday." You can say, "I'm sorry, I'll be on the interstate." And it's like one of the few places in the contemporary world where you can do that. And for extended periods of time, you can have all day to yourself. And that is a very, very rare commodity that we have today. So when I was building this project, and I was looking for a word that brought all of these ideas together of what I felt the interstate was from this particular point of view. The word that I came up with was Bardo. If you're not familiar, Bardo is a word that comes from Tibet, and it means an in-between state of being. And most commonly, it refers to the place after death, but before rebirth. So it is this other world that is in between, kind of like a limbo district. But what makes it very, very special, it is implied in Bardos, and there are 6 total, with like sleep and meditation being other ones. But the special thing about a Bardo is they offer the opportunity for transformation. And that is exactly how I was using the interstate. And that was actually what I was very interested in, why I think it's important enough to do a whole body of work about it. So let me talk about how I structured the project itself. I kind of approach my work, I think of it as like making a film. And in this case, I have divided the work into landscapes and portraits. The landscapes serve the role of setting the scene and also setting the tone. And then the portraits are the characters that are in this place that I've described. So one of the things I wanted to come through with these photographs of the landscapes is monumentality and the sense of being overwhelmed. And you'll notice in the gallery that the landscapes are way bigger. They're 40 by 60. So I wanted the viewer to be completely immersed. And I also wanted, I find the structures of the interstate to be overpowering, overwhelming, and monumental. And there's something about that feeling that makes people small, like when you are at the Grand Canyon, or you're in a tiny ship in the middle of the big ocean, or you're looking up and looking at the immensity of the sky. It's a wonderful feeling when you see like the entire universe and you feel just like a complete little speck. It's like a loss of self and a joining with all of his existence. And that's kind of the feeling I was going for. I like to shoot high. One of the other things is the pictures need to feel slightly surreal, not completely, but have a kind of weird edge to them. So what I did is I took one of my cameras and I had it changed to be infrared sensitive. So you can see here, one of the things that infrared does is it makes the skies very dramatic, but also, I don't know, do you see an arrow there moving around? No, thanks. So one of the problems photographing in the South in summer is everything's green. And in black and white, green becomes middle gray. It's not a dark or light, it's just all the same gray. So if I was shooting landscape straight, it would just be so boring. But having that infrared pops it out a little bit, so you have some dark areas and some light areas. I'm shooting on a very, very slow shutter speed, and so that means that objects that are moving, they can be blurred like this, and if they're moving fast enough, you won't even see them. And so I liked the idea of things feeling illusory, like they're not really solid, you're not sure they're really there. And there's also this very interesting kind of visual metaphor going on. If you'll see right here, this is like guardrail. and the tractor trailer here, they're very blurred. And the trees back here are very sharp. That's because relative to the camera, things that are close go by very fast. So there's a lot more blur, as opposed to something way off in the distance. In relation to the camera, not so much. And for me, I felt that was this wonderful metaphor about when you're in that interior space and thinking about your life, things that are going on right now that are very close to you, it's very hard to have perspective on it. You're in the middle of it, so it's just kind of a big blur, as opposed to when you're thinking about things that happened years ago. That distance in time gains you a little more perspective, and you're able to kind of figure out things and make associations and come to conclusions. One of the other things that I felt was very, very important to get across is kind of the opposite of that sense of awe and being a very, very small thing. And that is a feeling that I get many times on the interstate, particularly at dusk, and is that sense of ultimate aloneness. And this may shock you, but at some point, as living beings, we are going to die. And when you die, you do die alone. So I think I wanted to bring in that kind of sense of aloneness that can also come about on these internal journeys. So let me talk to you about some of the things I did with the people. First of all, we needed them to be those little bubbles, very isolated and not part of the landscape. And to make the people sharp so you can see their expressions, which is the number one most important thing about the people, is be able to look at them. I wanted their expressions to intrigue you and make you wonder, like I did, what was going on in their minds since they were so deep in thought. And to make them sharp, you needed a lot of depth of field, which is everything close to far away is all very sharp and a fast shutter speed, so even though they're moving, everything's sharp and crisp. So I would go in, and as you see, I throw out of focus things that are behind the people and in the front. So they have that kind of isolation, and in the surrounding areas, just kind of this blur. And also, no one ever notices this, but this is a chrome front, which I darkened down, and then I took out all the emblems and text and everything, which would also kind of throw you into the real world. We don't want that. Whoops. Whoa. She's one of my favorites. Also, I needed the landscape that they were in to resemble the landscapes that I had on the big pictures. And it's so hard to get good pictures of people, and oftentimes what was behind them in the background was terrible. It was like a parking deck or, cows or something. So as I was driving, I would take background pictures out the window for the purpose of dropping them in. So originally, this had a different background, and I put something that was more similar to the landscapes. This is, I call her Nancy Drew. Because to me, she looks like, she's like, did old man Jenkins commit that murder or not? But what did I want to say about this one? It's just how it's all about the expression. So it was technically very challenging to be able to get that. One of the best, it was also very important to have very different angles. So I was having cameras looking out in different ways. This one is facing directly back. All of those that are frontal, most of those are taken when I'm in stop and go traffic to get something, that close where you can really look into the face. Something else, I wanted to create this kind of intimacy. You know, physically, when you're in front of the landscapes, you have to stand back to kind of take it all in. And I made the portraits very small, so you then move in to look very closely at them and creating a more intimate moment and connecting with the other people. Here's one where the background actually worked. Usually I avoided cars to have that sense that they're in their own little bubble and then a little world. But I really liked all these cars. It looked like the same car over and over and over. So that's the real background. And I also love that expression on her face. And again, stop and go traffic. Some people go, oh my God, she's on her phone and driving. And I'm like, no, stop and go traffic. In many of my projects, there's the main subject, what the whole project is about. But the good ones have a whole bunch of other things. I think of it as subplots. One thing I realized with this project, I think of the interstate as kind of the public space, the town square of our time, because our culture makes it pretty much necessary to have a car, and at some point in time, everybody's going to be on the interstate. However, usually when you're on the interstate, 90% of the people are either going to work locally or going to work long distance. Or, and there's a huge number of these, it's retired people who are going to their sons to see the new grandbaby. Lots of those. And that would become very boring. And I wanted kind of this wonderful random selection of who actually makes up America. So in the 7 years that I was photographing this, I made a point of being out there the days before and the days on and after a major holiday, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, those kind of things. And that's where I got some of my most amazing pictures. This one was taken on Easter. Just something else to realize is the sheer number of images that I was photographing. Because I had, for the people who had the camera on a tripod and had a remote, it was set to continuous. So, you know, I'm not looking through the camera, I'm driving. And so when I know that I'm passing a car or somebody's passing me, then I just use the remote, not even looking to. So in one day, I'm shooting anywhere from like 600 to 2,000 images. And that's when it comes very important to have a clear idea of what you're looking for, because I'm going through thousands of images. And it's really, at this point, because I have no chance to interact or direct with the people that I'm photographing, my subjects. So it's about artists as editor or archivist. You're going through this huge body of work and you're looking for things that you come upon that support, that work, that have whatever it is that you're looking for. One of the other things is so many people, somebody says like, everybody's so sad and upset. And it was true. There's a lot of people who are going through what I thought of this internal journey and contemplating their lives. They did tend to look a little grim. So I was trying very hard to find moments of joy. This was a great one, although looking at the mother, I have a feeling that the kid is laughing at the mom. Still, it's a happy picture. But this is one of my best. I love her, and I would love to know what she's thinking. And this was kind of some of the last things that I photographed, because this kind of wrapped up what I was looking for. Oh, yeah. besides the expressions and so on, looking for things that would add different layers of meaning. I was really attracted to this visor. It's almost like this sunbonnet that this young lady is wearing. And to me, it's kind of that state of somebody being very blinkered, so that all they can see is the immediate what's in front of them. Like she's very scared or wants to just keep all of that away. This is one of my favorite images. By the way, I was not hiding the fact that I was photographing as I was driving. This was not, under the cover or, something like that. Everybody could see the camera on the tripod. And I usually respected, like, if they had a very angry reaction or negative. But I like this because he's having this reaction, but you can't see his face. So I'm kind of honoring clearly his wishes. But in the context of this project, what it is like, is somebody really fighting off that exterior world. I haven't had enough time. I want to stay here in the interior world. In this one, I had another rule of not having people that are looking directly into the camera, but this reflection happened to work out just perfectly, where it's going across her eyes, and I think it really transformed her to, she's kind of like this mythological being, like a goddess or justice who's blind, that the statues, they have the blindfold, but it makes her kind of anonymous and like I said, this kind of otherworldly being. And so I like that that's like the one that you connect with in this underworld that you're traveling through. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to talk about. And so at this point, I invite you to ask any questions that you might have.